here back on the podcast to talk about the simple road toward financial freedom. These two amazing gentlemen, Mark Schlipman and Steve Short, have an amazing book that is a guide to helping young adults build wealth. They are co-authors of this #1 Amazon best-selling book. Mr. Steve is a retired C-suite executive and strategic advisor with 30 plus years leading multi-billion-dollar divisions across travel, technology, and consumer businesses, specializing in growth, partnerships, and customer experience. And in the other corner, we have Mr. Mark, a veteran financial advisor with 25 plus years of experience helping individuals and families make smarter financial decisions through simple, disciplined frameworks. And together, and in this book, they focus on helping you cut through that complexity and show you how clarity, structure, and simplicity drive better decisions in money, business, and life. It's what we want. And so we're here to talk about some of these simple rules that beat detailed plans, paying yourself first, avoiding those common money mistakes, and just living the life and business and lifestyle of your dreams so that way you can alter your family tree, break generational curses, etc. All these things that we want. And Mark and Steve are here to help us do that. So the co-authors of the amazing book, The Simple Road Toward Financial Freedom, how are you guys?
Great.
We're
Thanks,
great.
Robert.
Thanks for having us on.
Happy to have you. And so what did I leave out of that introduction? What are you guys all about?
You know, basically,
oh.
well, I'll just cut Steve off early. Might as well just do that now.
Get it out of the way.
Just get out of the way. You know, we actually met our boys were freshmen, and we met at a dad's weekend and just talking about different things and financial topics. And I basically complimented Steve being a financial advisor, a fiduciary advisor, that he knows a lot of information about this space. And it was just interesting that how he was able to teach even his own family members, you know, financial principles, et cetera. And he was amazed, I think, not to put words in Steve's mouth, if I'm going to real quick. I think he was amazed that he thought that most adults knew this information, but we did share the common thread that there's not enough education for the young people to grasp hold of and to actually make the right steps first to build a great foundation. And so in a nutshell, we decided to, about a year after we met, to write a book.
Very nice.
And just to maybe tag on to that, after my kids graduated from college and entered the working world, I sat down with them and just went over 401k matches and just all that stuff. And it was evident to me that they didn't get any personal finance skills. So we teach our kids algebra and science and all these other things, but personal finance is one that eludes us. And so then my next daughter graduated from college. I did the same thing and got the same outcome. And so I was talking to Mark, and then my kids were telling me, Dad, these guys, the kids that I'm graduating with don't know anything. They don't know anything about emergency funds. They're living paycheck to paycheck. And so that's what started the conversation with Mark. I go, do you see this? And I assumed he was going to say no, because he doesn't deal with recent college graduates. He deals with folks that are, you know, in their probably 40s and 50s as an average customer. And he goes, I see it all the time. And so that's what we said, let's put our heads together and write a book. No one really caters to this audience, because you might imagine most people are writing books to sell another product, and we're not doing that. It's just simply a passion project for us, because it's a shame that there's so many 20-year-olds that are entering the workforce with really no personal finance skills. And so we're really trying to make an impact with that.
You know, Robert, The interesting thing is I get this a lot. People are like, hey, I read your book and you're recommending that the young people don't need a financial advisor. I'm like, exactly. We give you the steps that you don't need a financial advisor. And in fact, and just in full transparency, which I think was interesting, I think that maybe built a lot of trust between Steve and I early on, is him knowing him, getting to know him a little bit better over the years. I did ask him, I go, because he would normally be a prospect that I would, you know, target, especially being in his 50s, right? I said, if you do have a financial advisor, you probably fire that advisor, because you really could do this on your own. And so that's, I think, the impact of the book is that we're not, like Steve said, we're not trying to sell anything. Actually, it's a passion project. We're giving money back to part of the proceeds back to a charity. But it's really to help the younger generation. And also, and we'll talk about this a little bit more as well, Steve's got a great example of this, is that, you know, a lot of parents that I find read the book and they're like, you know what, we had no idea that it could be explained so simple. And now you're giving us the tools to help our kids train them on good financial disciplines, because, you know, you could know how to do things, but then again, so many people are in their business and so worked up and complicated that, you know, when I was growing up, Robert, it was just basically work harder, just work hard. And well, that is one way to do it, but you got to have that discipline and savings mentality for the future.
Very nice. It's an important message for the youngins, right? About budgeting, saving, investing, and am I right in that maybe the younger generation has it a lot tougher because you figure about how like you always see these graphs that diverge, right? And they say things like, well, minimum wage in all of the 50 states used to cover a home, and now like they're all priced out, and like credit scores were invented as recently as 1989, which blew my mind, and they market credit cards to college kids, and it just seems like there's a long list of the Gen Zs, Gen Alphas, like some of them it seems like will never own a home. But is that just talk, or is it really a lot tougher for the young kids these days?
I I am one that would like to push back a little bit on that. I do think that um, the facts are the facts in terms it's a little bit harder. But I do think part of that is just because there's so many. If you the stat that I saw the other day, 2 out of 3 employees are financially stressed. I mean, that's a huge number. And I think a lot of it is just because they didn't have the foundation and the personal finance skills. So is it harder? It is, if you haven't done some of these things really before you're 30 years old, to kind of, ideally before 30. It's never too late to do anything, of course, but ideally before 30 years old, if we can reach this population, have them start putting aside money and start setting up. We have a couple contents in the book that are talking about budgeting, putting money into bucket 1, which is like an emergency fund and short-term needs. And then bucket 2 is little longer term needs. And bucket 3 is 5+ years. And we have some tips that are in the book in terms of what to do with those things. But if you can just start that mindset, we talk about all the time the snowball effect. There's so many people that we've heard from that are like, I don't know where to start. And so I do think that if somebody doesn't have a plan, then it is going to be really hard to be able to afford the down payment and to buy a house, because they don't know any other way. They're not intentionally doing anything, but they're just kind of living paycheck to paycheck because that's all they know. And so as quickly as the money comes in, it might be going back out. And so that's what we're really trying to do here, is kind of change that narrative and get people to follow one of the systems that we have in there is the 50-20-30 save first model. So 50% go to needs, rent and a mortgage or what have you, 20% to your savings, ideally, and then 30% to wants. But it gives a little framework. It's not that we invented anything with that, but it's just something that people can use to be able to say, okay, here's some guardrails for me that as I'm making money, I should try to live in kind of these rough numbers in terms of how much I should be saving. And the savings can come from 401ks, but that's a little bit longer answer to say, is it harder? It is, but I think there's an opportunity out there to change that a little bit if we can just teach these personal finance skills.
I like it. So you're saying, is it a little bit harder? Yes, but that's a reason to really take this seriously and to apply some of this. And so when, it's one thing to learn some information, but another to actually like change your mind and make things a habit and do this every day. And have you noticed any like resistance from the young kids, or is there any point when it clicks for them? Like, oh, I need to have the emergency fund, I need to have the buckets. Is there anything that just kind of makes them turn on to these ideas?
I think you're the kids that, and young adults and even parents who commit to spending the time to actually open the book to read are open to something. And and we explain it in a very simple fashion that we do hear a lot of feedback. I wish I would have known this when I was in my 20s, or I wish I would have known this when I was graduating from college or high school, etc. So we hear a lot of those things. And that's one thing we do talk about in the book, is not only the visualization, and we call it, financial freedom, working toward financial freedom, because everybody's idea of financial freedom is different. I've got clients that want to be the richest person in the graveyard, to people that want to enjoy life and save money for the future, but it's all about your own choice. And, Steve and I, we did not meet at a writer's guild. I mean, we were basically two dads and decided, hey, let's write a book, and we had no idea what we're doing. And a lot of people feel the same way when it comes to personal finance, because are things harder today? That's an argument, it's an argument to be made. But is there more information and distractions that come at our way that kind of muddies the water? Absolutely. And the one thing that Steve and I committed on, because we had no idea what we were doing as far as even writing a book, and I would apply that to people don't know what they're doing when it comes to retirement savings or saving for a house or whatever the goals are, is that we committed to about 2.5 hours every Monday morning. And we didn't talk about the book on the weekends. We didn't talk about it during the week, but every Monday morning, 2.5 hours. And then a little bit over 2 years later, we had a book. So if people are so busy working in their business or on their business or in their job or on their job, but to step back and treat your personal finances as a business and give it some time, hey, I'm going to commit, Fridays at a certain time. I want to work on my budget. I'm going to work on my numbers and see where the leakage is in my spending this week. But to answer your question, I believe people are open to it who are willing to open a book or download the audiobook, because they want information. And then once we give it to them and they appear to take it on as very simple steps, then we can create some action.
Well, nice. Well, they say the eighth wonder of the world is compound interest. And so if you can just set aside a little bit every week, and that it ripples into the future in the future decades, like hugely. And same thing with your time, right? You say, well, if you say, I don't have time to learn this money stuff, well, you put aside that 1 hour in the weekend or wake up 15 minutes earlier, just do it in little bits. And like you said, listen to the audiobook or read the book and go through these simple steps. And before you know it, you are on a new path. And learning new things is all about those ahas and those breakthroughs. And I know that you mentioned things like STL, stop, talk, listen. But is there anything that you think is maybe like really cool that if we hear about this concept, we'll like go and run and check out this book?
Going back to the 50, 20, 30, I think from our presentations that we do to businesses is kind of that aha moment, because as I kind of touched on earlier, people are really looking for a plan. They see so much, especially the group that we're targeting on TikTok, and just there's so much noise that's out there. Everybody's got this get rich quick theme. And what we've really tried to do through our presentations is say, it's not going to be a get rich quick. It's going to be, you're going to be thanking yourself later, though, if you can follow the 50, 20, 30 method. So we also have an example in there that talks about this, how the 20% can impact somebody that's just starting off, entry-level job, not a six-figure salary or anything, but about $50,000 a year. And if they can put aside 20% and get their company match, how that can grow to over $1 million in about 20 years. And that's a typical stock market returns like the S&P 500, which nothing's guaranteed, but it's been proven to return about 10% every year. But we sort of showed the example step by step of kind of what that looks like, which I actually used that example with my kids. And that was one that their minds were blown a little bit in terms of like, so I've got this entry level job. If I can put aside that amount of money, that I can have $1 million in 20 years from now, was a mind-blowing situation, especially when I told them that you don't have to put aside $1 million. You put aside about $250,000, and then the stock market returns. And like you're talking about with compounding and growth in the stock market, the next thing you know, free money makes up 3/4 of it. And so that was another mind-blowing situation of like, I don't need to save $1 million to have $1 million. So I would say that's probably the biggest one that we hear in terms of feedback from folks, the 50, 20, 30, and making sure that they've got these sort of situations set up to where they can put aside money, have a plan.
And I love little concepts like that, where you say there's like your own like intuitiveness, common sense over here, and then there's this like math equation over there. And it's like, hey, if you do, I know your brain doesn't compute in the present moment, especially as a young kid. You think you're indestructible. And just 2 days ago, a 17-year-old told me that age 25 is old. And I was like, you're insulting me. Like 25, yeah. Your life hasn't even started yet. But it's like, yeah, like we were all there at some point, right? We're like 10 years in the future seem like 200 years in the future. And so there's kind of like a little bit of like overriding your common sense sometimes if the math fits. And then also like, the American dream is all about that get rich quick mentality and like overly optimistic and things like that. But if we can maybe have some humility and delayed gratification mixed in with that, then we can really get to these these really incredible futures. And maybe we do the hard work or the strategic planning now, and you maybe you don't get the fancy car now, but you get the even fancier car once you're a multi-millionaire. And so you've helped these youngins and oldins, and you've changed some lives. Do you have any interesting story to share on a podcast? Because we love stories on a podcast. So what do you have?
You speaking of a car. So I graduated college and jumped into this profession. I was on my way to law school, and I shifted gears and went more of the financial services. And that shiny object, that car, was right there. And I pulled the trigger on a slightly loved car that was a little pricey. And about a year later, I realized my mortgage payment probably should be more than my car payment, but it wasn't. My car payment was more than my mortgage payment. And I sat down, I was engaged, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I thought to myself, okay, if I drive it for 10 years, I can justify it. And that's what I did. But I quickly realized I'd never want to be back in that situation again. Because you're right. Once you hit your goals, then, that's where maybe the nicer car can actually happen. And that's one thing I would say, Robert, that we put in the book, and we get a lot of feedback from this, that the younger generations appreciate that we're not latte shaming. We're not saying you should not do something, or you should not buy something, or you should not do this, that, and the other. Because if you got a game plan, you're reaching your goals, we still leave 30% for all the fun stuff. It's like, you're doing the 20%, maybe you can't do 20% now, maybe do 8%, then 12%, whatever that right number is for you. Or maybe you're not spending so much money on housing and rent. But we're not advocating that you eat ramen until you become debt free. We're not advocating that. It's truly like a life's trade-off decision book that, you can have more quicker if you don't do those things, but you can also achieve or work towards your goals very effectively by just following the system within your means. So I think that's the big takeaway, that we're not here saying that you should not be drinking a latte or having avocado toast. We do advocate that, hey, reward yourself, but also be mindful of what your spending is.
And just to tag on to that, to your point, Robert, you're talking about the American dream and the entrepreneurial spirit and things along those lines. We're definitely not saying don't focus on that, but that's when we talk about financial freedom, that could be somebody's personal choice of what they want to do once they have this money set up. To kind of Mark's point, if you want to spend it on latte, the 30% of what things you want, lattes, maybe it is investing in starting a business, donating to charity, whatever that case may be. There's still that opportunity, but you're kind of taking care of your future self by putting aside that money. And just a quick moment on that is that 20% is the goal. If you can do that, you're going to be very thankful down the line, especially if you start that in your 20s. But I just ran an analysis the other day, and if you're somebody that can start saving before you're 30 years old, if you can save 4% a year, and if you get a 4% increase in your salary, which if you're a newer employee, hopefully your salary increases are going to be more than 4% a year. At least that's what I saw in kind of the corporate world. If the stock market returns the 10%, like we were talking about, then you're going to be set up with what Fidelity and the Schwabs and kind of the experts out there would say is a safe amount of money in retirement, just by saving 4% a year. So make sure I said that correctly. So 4% salary goes, 4% match is another key from 401k and things along those lines. But that's just the power of time that you've got here. So if you can do 20%, that's going to be awesome. You're really going to be thankful. But just something small, you can be set up with having, I think the 4% a year, well, actually, I know at 10% and all the numbers that I shared earlier is $2.3 million by the time that you're 65. So that's a big amount of money there, but it's something that's really critical to get that started if you can before you're 30. But to Mark's point earlier, if you can do 20%, you're really going to be rolling in with some big balances later at age 65.
And this is what makes the money guys in my life or that I've met a lot of fun, right? When you look at the paths, the possibilities, and it's because it is kind of paradoxical, isn't it? That discipline equals freedom. And if you want to get more out of life, well, you have to take these steps now and like put the money in containers and figure out what's the structure now. And it kind of hurts your brain a little bit, right? Because you say, well, I want to have all this freedom and I want to do what I want. And you say, well, you are doing what you want, but with steps, right? With milestones, and there's a method to the madness. And there's so much that we could talk about. And this book seems like it has everything, right? There's the family budget, health savings accounts, investing, death and inheritance, building your credit score, all these things that, like you said at the beginning, the school system teaches us that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But when it comes to having that budget, they say, hey, you're on your own, even though it's like such an important foundational life skill. But luckily, those of us that are smart can check out this book. And in these last few minutes of our discussion, do you think there might be a missing question in our conversation that I should be asking you both? I just don't know what to ask you.
I would say, I don't know if you've missed anything because it's been a great 20 minutes. We'd love to have people follow us and help spread the mission. We're, as we kind of alluded to at the start, we're just two dads that saw a need, and we're trying to spread the word as much as possible. So we'd love to have people go to simpleroadbook.com, and you can follow us on our socials. We put out videos that are just bite-sized, under a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, every single week, that are little components from the book, or maybe they're new things that maybe people didn't know about. We've heard good reviews on that. So we'd love to have more people follow us and sign up for the email and spread the word as much as possible.
Very cool. And you're a couple of cool guys who are hip to the technology, right? You're targeting the young people, and you're financial guys that are on Insta and on TikTok. And so it's can be a fun, entertaining way to get your daily dose, right? Because it is a lot to take in, especially if you're not swimming in this financial world, and money can be like sometimes for some reason boring, but also scary, but also not what you want. But hey, if you want to hang on to it and have it in later years, you need to take this seriously. So that's why we should go to simpleroadbook.com. You can find out about the book, find out about those social media links, and especially what we really want to do is sell some books here, right? So you click over to Amazon or Audible and get this book called The Simple Road Toward Financial Freedom. It's a best-selling practical book that helps young adults learn the money habits school never taught, so you can take control, start saving with confidence, and build long-term financial freedom, with a foreword from Will Ferrell, of all people. And so it's an amazing resource that you should check out right now if you want to take this seriously, because financial freedom shouldn't be complicated. That's simpleroadbook.com. And as we're headed there, and before I let you two guys go, it's time for the scary part of the podcast, where I try to stump both of you, put you on the spot by asking about a fun or interesting quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun or interesting quote or lesson?
If you live each day as if it's your last, one day you'll certainly be right.
Ooh, I like that. What do you have, Mr. Steve?
I'd probably say what gets measured gets managed. So I don't know if that's a scary one, but something I've sort of lived by, that if you and fits right in, I guess, with the book here. But if it's important to you, that you'll manage it and find a solution.
Oh yeah, and I just had a conversation on the previous podcast about that, and it applies to so many contexts, right? There's your money, there's your health, there's your weight, there's your time management. If you want to improve, you have to measure it. And if you don't, then it'll just be total chaos. And maybe that's where you are now, and it's fine. But that means it's more important than ever to get this book. It's a #1 Amazon bestseller. You go to simpleroadbook.com, click on the button that says buy the book. We've been speaking with Mr. Mark Schlipman and Steve Short, who are the co-authors of The Simple Road Toward Financial Freedom. They help young professionals and organizations build money confidence with practical systems you can actually follow, taught in plain language without the hype. simpleroadbook.com, The Simple Road Toward Financial Freedom, a guide to helping young adults build wealth. Mr. Mark and Mr. Steve, it's been such a blast speaking with you. Thanks for showing up.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Robert.